Hey there. We're going to take a look at the idea of computers and the vocabulary surrounding it. We're going to go ahead and get started. So please make sure you have something to write down, some notes with. It'll just help you make sense of the words better and it'll help you remember them in the long term. Okay, let's go ahead and go. How many computers can you count? Go ahead and take a look at that picture and give me your best guess. Give you about 10 seconds. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the answer that I was looking for. It's okay if you don't come up with the same one. If you want a little more time, just pause the video and give yourself more time. But I'm going to move on here. So you may have come up with 7 or not. Perhaps you were looking for something specific based on your understanding of a computer. In other words, your own definition of a computer. But originally, computers was the title given to people who worked on making math calculations, and women actually played a very important role in this area, especially at NASA and in the military. They worked on advanced scientific and military calculations. You can visit history.com and learn some more very interesting information there about their contributions. All right, it's probably something you were not immediately aware of. So when you saw this picture, it probably confused you a little bit, and you were not able to come up with the correct answer. Okay, so that begs the question. We need to make sure we have our definition of computers clear so that there's no confusion, all right, as far as our present time use of the word computer. So let's go ahead and review that vocabulary for ourselves. We need to understand the word compute before we can understand what a computer is, right? Computer is a noun, compute is a verb. So let's start first with the verb. What does it mean to compute? Well, we're going to use the following definition. Okay, we're going to use the verb compute to mean to accept input that can be processed, stored, retrieved, and output as a result. So it's going to be very important that you understand each and every single one of these terms on their own, because if you don't, you're going to be confused as far as what the entire verb compute means, the one we're using. All right, so please make sure you jot down, pause the video, jot down this verb compute definition that we have here on the screen. Unpause when you're ready to continue. All right, we're going to ask ourselves now, based on this definition that we have here on the right for the verb compute, can this compute here? Well, let's assume we have this system or machine. This is our system and our machine. Let's take a look. Input, what's that? Well, input is what is put into a system. So in this case, the yellow arrow is pointing to the input that is entering the system. Process, it's what the system does, and it's usually what it does to the input or using the input. So in this case, the input is processing that food that entered in to the system, right? Storage is what the system makes use of to save something for later. So in this case, the system is saving part of that food, which it converted into a sugar and an energy for later. Usually that's, your tummy on the side, the fat. Fat is stored energy, right? Because maybe later on you need that energy. All right, so it has storage. And then retrieve, that's when the system gets something that was already stored. So let's say in the future after eating, that system or that machine starts working out. Well, it needs some of that energy that is stored in fat. So it's going to go ahead and pull that from storage because now is the later use. So it's going to retrieve that storage for later. And then output. Output is when the system processing makes a product, right? So in this case, it could be sweat. It could be the actual movement. Those are outputs or results. And it could also be, fecal matter because that's what got produced by the processing. It was let as output. So can this machine compute, the system compute? Yes. According to our definition, it has all of the attributes. It meets all the requirements. All right, how about this one? Can this compute? I'm going to go ahead and break it down as well. I'm going to go a little faster. Here's our system or our machine. The input is what we put into the system. Well, what do we put in? We could put money. We could also put or send in signals, right? Processed. What processing does it do? Well, it might inspect the money. Very likely does, to make sure that it's received the right money. What kind of storage is involved? Well, it saves some of that input that comes in stacks of coins, right? Retrieve. What might it retrieve? Well, it might retrieve some of the stored coins that were there from a prior time. Output. What kind of output can we get? Maybe we can get some change that comes out, or perhaps maybe we get a product that comes out. So those are possible outputs. So when we look at this, can this compute? Yes, it also meets all the criteria there to describe the verb compute. All right, so can these two things compute? The answer is yes. So these are computers according to our definition, because these are nouns that meet the definition of the verb. But hold on, that's probably not what you usually think of, right? You think more of these items here on the right, your desktop and your tablet or laptop. So what keyword or keywords would you add to this verb definition to convert it into a noun definition of a computer that you're used to thinking of? Give it a second. What keywords would you think of adding to this definition to make it into the definition of a noun, not a verb? Go ahead and pause. Continue when you are ready. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and continue here. This is the definition that we're going to be using. And notice I added the item here, or the words here in purple. This converts it from a verb definition to a noun definition. So here, a computer is an electronic device that accepts input that can be stored, retrieved, processed, and output as a result. Please jot that down into your note catcher or your notes. This is the definition that we will rely on. So this is the definition I'm expecting you to provide when you're asked about the definition of a computer. Please also draw this illustration. This illustration here lists some of the key terms that we just described, but also places them so that we can begin talking later about the flow of these items. So we have the input device sending stuff in to this computer, which is this green rectangle, and then out of it, it's sending things to the output device. Inside the computer, there's some processing that happens, represented by this square, and that processing makes use of storage. It puts things into storage, that's a store, and it retrieves things or grabs things from storage in order to do its processing. All right. So according to all of this updated definition, technically, this still meets that definition of a computer. Probably not what you're used to, but you know what? With technology and computers, it's about adapting and changing constantly. Okay, so let's summarize what we've covered here. So a computer, the noun, is an electronic device that accepts input that can be stored. So the input itself can be stored, it can be retrieved, it can be processed, and eventually it can be changed as output as the final result. All right, some type of output. Many things in this world perform actions that are computer-like. Doesn't always mean they're computers, but could be. But this is the definition that we're going to be using. All right. So here's some extended thinking though for you. All right. So what might happen when you think of the future? What might happen that's going to possibly change the definition of computers? Because you saw that things already changed. Your maybe great grandparents or great great grandparents understood this as a computer at one point in time, right? So that definition right here would not make any sense. They would say, no, a computer is not an electronic device. It's a human that accepts input that can be stored, retrieved, processed, and output as a result, because they're doing mathematical calculations. But now that definition has changed, right? This is perhaps what your parents were introduced to, or someone more recent, yourselves as well. And this is also what falls perhaps under your definition of computer. So just extended thinking, what might happen in the future to what we're used to seeing that might change this definition of a computer? Okay, well, I'll leave you with that thought to think how the future might change what we imagine computers to be, but keep in mind what computers are now for ourselves, which is a computer is an electronic device that accepts input that can be stored, retrieved, processed, and output as a result.